What's up, guys? We are back here with episode 4, I think. Numbers are hard. We're doing case studies with individuals who are masochistic enough, should we say, to work with me as a coach, and who we feel have some issues that we're working on that are going to be useful for you out there watching you. These are hopefully things that you're encountering, and we can give you some solutions to that. So today we have Brad. Thank you for coming along, Brad. Do you want to give us just a little bit of context about you, what you do, your goals, and that type of thing before we dive in, so people know kind of what angle we're coming at this from?
Sure. Professionally, I'm a firefighter and a paramedic.
And an exotic dancer.
Shh. I'm also an instructor in lots of aspects of fire and EMS. I'm a dad. I'm a powerlifter. I'm a guy who has struggled with sleep for the 22 years of my professional career. And that was one of the things that we started working on, you and I, from the jump, was like, if you can't sleep, you can't remember the things you need when you're, say, studying for a promotional exam, which we just did, or you can't recover from your training when you're preparing for SPF Worlds, which we just did, or any of the other things that you might want to get better at. So a big part of our work together has been improving sleep that has been hindered by the career I have chosen.
Sure. And just again, for a little bit of context there, what is it about your work that makes sleep so difficult for you?
So in this part of the world, firefighters work 24 hours at work and then 48 hours off of work. So some folks think, well, they just sleep when they're at work. And what I like to tell people is that we have the option. We don't always have the opportunity. So there are beds in the firehouse, and we could sleep at night if there weren't fires, medical emergencies, rescues, all the other things that people call us for. So when you every 3 days get woken up multiple times in the middle of the night by lights coming on or loud tones beeping in your head, that throws off the whole circadian rhythm. So when you come home, how do you recover from that? Lots of guys try to nap, and then that throws off your sleep that night, or any number of other self-medicating things to adjust when you get home. But you just can't adjust to waking up multiple times a night every third night.
Sure. There's like a constant, I suppose the big problem there is that one bad night of sleep has these like domino effect on the other nights there, where, like you say, if you nap, but then nap too well, I guess,
right,
then you can't sleep at your regular time the next night, and so on and so forth. Now, you mentioned SPF Worlds there. So again, for a little bit more context, you had your exam for a big promotion at work.
For a big promotion, correct.
And SPF Worlds in the same week.
4 days apart.
4 days apart. So that was it on the Tuesday, your exam, and then you competed on the Saturday.
Correct.
So we're going to go through your peak week protocol later on in the episode, but that's, for a little bit of context there, that's a busy week.
It was full,
yeah, there's a lot that went into that. We're going to look at how we got you kind of cognitively in a place where you could do well at both. And you did do very well at both. Congrats on both there.
Thank you.
But I think starting with the sleep is probably the most important one, because this is not just going to be for firefighters and EMS personnel. It's for everyone. But you have a scenario where everything is against you.
Sure.
So I think one of the big things to mention here, just from the off, is before we get into all the cool black magic stuff, is that how important do you think it is to have just a stable routine that you do regardless of location? Because obviously you're sleeping in different locations, right? And I can't remember who it was that said it, but it was a person of reasonable influence said something to the line of, own the last and the first hour of your day.
Yeah.
Like those are your time, and you have to make those as regimented as possible, and they kind of set you up for success at both ends. So what have you done to help kind of create that stability in what is quite an unstable sleep environment, should we say?
So first, control the controllables, right? So I like to think about it from the 2 days that I'm home. After dinner, my whole family does everything the same. So after dinner, we put on the blue blocker glasses. That way, if we have any screen time, which we try to limit a couple hours before bedtime. So I don't pick up my phone up a whole lot. You'll find my son's watching a cartoon. I'm sitting with him. I'm reading a book. We both got our glasses on. his bedtime routine has been the same since birth. After his bath, he, brushes his teeth. We get him in bed. I read him a story. Then I come downstairs and I do my bedtime stuff. And that's, I brush my teeth with him, but then I shower and then I sit. And this is a thing you and I worked on a few times, a few iterations, sit in front of the red light, do some non-sleep deep rest meditation, which is 1,000,000 years old. It's Yoga Nidra, right? So like kind of the body scan, think about relaxing everything. I should back up before when my son's in his shower, I'm taking the nighttime supplements that we're going to talk about later, so that stuff is already in. And if I can control that and I can make that to look the same on my first day home and my second day home, then I'm set up a little bit and I can paste that to the third day as work allows. Invariably, you'll be brushing your teeth and then somebody will need you and you'll have to go running out the door. But the supplements I take at home, for the most part, I take at work. The times that I do things at home, I try to mimic at work. The same mattress pad that's on the bed my wife and I sleep in is on my bed at work. You might have to come out of pocket a little bit to make your bunk at work the same as the one that you sleep in at home, but the closer you can mimic those things, the better your whole outcome is going to be.
I mean, you're looking at this through the lens of a dad too.
Yeah. And
that's not something I'm lucky enough to experience quite yet, but I do find it interesting that, when we're talking about like juveniles and young kids, every parent will really stress the importance of like there being a bedtime routine. Like they go to bed at a certain time, we do X, Y, and Z that leads up to bed. Because we intrinsically know like this is good. This allows for good sleep to happen. And then as an adult, it's almost like we feel like we mature out of that, like we don't need it. When in fact, actually, it's probably more important, if anything. Like if you have more responsibilities and if you have a bad day, there's more repercussions for that. So I think that's really important there. Now, invariably, work doesn't always allow you good sleep. So let's kind of go into how we mitigate some of those nights. So the first thing that we're going to be putting this up on the screen for you guys. So we got here the day after you have a bad night's sleep, whatever the definition is of that for you. First thing we're going to do is take high dose creatine in the morning. Now, the reason for this is that it pulls down cerebral inflammation. That's very, very much so. So you have the glymphatic system in your brain, which is basically like the rest, recovery, and waste product system of your brain. When you don't sleep enough, you don't have much chance for that system to actually work. The creatine kind of goes in and tries to make up for the fact that that system didn't get much to do. Now, we put here 15 grams for you. That's actually quite low, I would say. But have you had any downsides from that?
So
I would say
no, there have been no downsides. And we have played with that a little bit. We were up more than 20 grams and I didn't note significant changes in recovery after bad nights of sleep from 15 to 20 or even to 25. There's more and more research indicating that higher doses, even higher than that 25, are beneficial. And some of it is weight driven, right? Like a number I see a lot is 0.06 grams per pound of body weight for your daily dose. But at 25 grams and at 15 grams, I didn't note any significant difference. So we've just been riding at 15.
Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of the people, and yeah, I'm glad you mentioned body weight there because, people will very commonly, I actually literally had this yesterday. Someone's like, oh, well, I'm only taking 5 rather than the 15 because I'm saturated at 5 anyway. And it's like, well, first off, the idea that everyone gets saturated at 5 grams a day is kind of like, you might have someone like Ilya coming, strong man, 400 pounds or whatever. Like, I don't think 5 grams saturating him in a hurry, especially then you add in like training 4 or 5 days a week and you're using it up. So first off, I think there's room just from that muscular development, energetic side of things for higher dosages. But then people forget that creatine does cool things outside of the saturation in the muscle tissue, right? Like we have these cognitive benefits and, there's so many studies now looking at the effects of creatine on sleep deprivation. And it has some really good effects for this whole cerebral inflammation idea. And the cool thing about this is that, for someone like you or for someone who's like a night shift worker or maybe like a new parent, there isn't really a time limit that you could run that for. Like you could just do that every day, worst case. Now, obviously, it's not going to replace actually getting an extra 2 hours of sleep. But if you've got a newborn or, sometimes there are going to be stages of life where you don't get a choice, like 5 hours of sleep and you're done. That can be done forever, which not many sleep aids can say that.
Right.
Which I think brings a unique benefit for it.
I think that you touched on an important thing there that is going to be overarching as we go through here. None of this stuff is going to replace getting 2 more hours of sleep. But if I can get the most sleep out of however many hours of sleep I get, for me, on days that I'm home, get the 8 hours of sleep. But if I can get the most out of 8 hours, and then that'll set me up for when I only get 3 hours at work. Or a conversation you and I had the other day when my son was little, we struggled with sleep. So I spent a lot of long nights on days that I was home up with him. And for any new parent, if you're only getting 3 hours of sleep, what if you can get 100% of that 3 hours of sleep? What if that 3 hours of sleep feels like 4 hours of sleep? So it doesn't replace it, but these things combined kind of Voltron effect greater than the whole other parts.
You mentioned the non-sleep deep rest protocol there that you're doing pre-bed. And I think that's good to bring up because, especially if you're sleeping in like a busy environment or you have a stressful environment at home, and maybe you are being woken up perhaps repeatedly in the night, a big part of how much sleep you can get is going to be, well, how quickly can you go back to a parasympathetic state, a rest and digest state where you're actually able to sleep. So do you find that, it could, for you, it's that non-sleep deep rest. For someone else, it might be something else, box breathing or whatever, and we'll discuss that later. How much of that do you feel is your ability to unwind, especially like after call outs and things like that, that plays into the ability to cope on those more interrupted nights?
Before we got this dialed to where it is now, if I got a call after 2 a.m., I did not go back to sleep.
Sure.
And sometimes those calls are half an hour. So we go out the door at 2, I'm back by 2:30. Even the most benign thing, you go and you pick somebody up off the floor, a little old person is unable to stand up. No problem. We stand them up, we come home. Because I was dead asleep, and then the tones dropped, which is like beeps that are very loud, scaring you awake. And that's just the model. That's what it is. I couldn't, even if I'd come back and I'd sit and I'd do box breathing, I'd sit in the dark, I'd do all the things, I could not go back to sleep. So we'll talk about the breathing routine that you started me with that moved the ball forward. And that was a big help. If it was, I couldn't go to sleep after 2. Now maybe I could get to sleep as late as 4.
Sure.
And then the non-sleep deep rest moved that back even more. So there's still occasion that, if it's a big thing that we go out for that I don't get great sleep after, but my ability to fall back asleep with these tools has changed everything for me.
Cool. Well, let's look at those breathing drills now. So we've got one here. Again, these are going to be put up on the screen for everyone. So if you have chance before you go out, or like say you've woken up the middle of a sleep cycle, we all know what that feels like. You're not probably at your best to be making quick decisions, perhaps life-changing decisions, so on and so forth. So there's a very easy drill that you can see up on here, which involves breath holds that you can use to very quickly get in a sympathetic state. And the reason that we would do this is because this is going to very, very quickly have an effect, quicker than anything like a caffeine would, but it's also then not going to have a half-life in your system, so that Monster Energy or whatever it might be is still in you 4-6 hours later when you're desperately trying to sleep. So with the breath holds here, all you have to do is take a small breath in through your nose, breathe most of it out, and hold with your nose pinched. The reason you pinch your nose is just so you can't get that passive diffusion of oxygen down into your lungs without you actively breathing. You recover between them, do that a couple of times. Now, I did have to put this note on there for you because I have to do this for everyone. Yeah. The point is not to push the breath hold as hard as you can, because then you can end up blacking out. And there's always one person, if we do this at this has happened at a seminar, because this is a great drill you can do like pre-workout. You know, if you're training later in the evening, you don't want to be full of stimulants, or you're just feeling a bit groggy, like doing these breath holds can give you a pick-me-up that gets out of your system quick and works really well. There's always the one person who like turns it into a competition and then ends up like spaced out there. So that is there to help within a couple of minutes be like, okay, I'm awake and ready to go. And then after the call out, we have, you know, this could be box breathing. It could be 100 different things, right? But I think the important thing about a parasympathetic breathing drill is that it needs to work on elongating the exhale. Yeah. But my problem with, should we say, traditional box breathing, or like the more uniform structures where it's like breathe in for 1 or 2, breathe out for 4, most people end up having their mind drift and get caught by other things. Whereas like this one here looks a little bit more complicated, because like the first exhale is 1 second, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 10. Most of that, you know, to look behind the curtain of that, most of that is because then you have to think a little bit more, and you have to be more in the moment with the breath, as it were. And it reduces how much of this other stuff can pollute your thought process there. So in your experience, like I've gotten written there, repeat that cycle twice. In your experience, does it require more than that? Does it require less than that? And what kind of difference are both of those making to your state of readiness and, you know, I guess readiness in terms of sleep too? Yeah.
So I'd like to go back to the initial breath hold during the call out, right? So for me, that looks like on my way to the truck, right? And so tones drop, we got to be out the door in 2 minutes. If I'm dead asleep, that means getting dressed, getting my boots on, getting to the truck. And I can hold my breath. I can take a short breath. I can exhale. I can hold my nose, and I can do that while I walk to the truck. On the days that I'm not driving, which now is almost never, thanks to a promotion, I can continue to work on breath holds whilst my driver is driving me to whatever the call is. If I was behind the wheel, maybe you don't do that stuff. So yeah, let's get that out there. But that really, you know, helps you clear your head, start thinking about the information you have for whatever the upcoming run is, the call is. So you're clearer of mind and can kind of process that thing, because we say size up starts before dispatch. So you got to know your community, you got to know your district. Well, then they give us information. Now I got to start processing this information, and then I have to convey this information to however many members are on my team in my truck today. So the more we can do that with a clear head, the better we'll all be. And you can ask my guys when we get into deep stuff, like I'll be coaching their breathing while we're doing other things. All right, everybody slow down, take a deep breath, hold it, exhale. As for the prolonged exhales when we come back, it kind of depends on how spun up we were. Sometimes 1 out, 2 out, 3 out, 10 out twice is enough. Sometimes I need to do it more than that. What I found is helpful for me, instead of doing that series more times than 2, is I extended the series. So after a 3-second exhale, I do a 4-second exhale, and then I work up to 10. And it is the extending exhales like you mentioned, but it's a classic mindful meditation thing. If I'm thinking about my exhale, I'm not thinking about anything else. And if nothing else, if it does nothing other than that, then it gets rid of that noise while your heart rate comes down and you're lowering your respiratory rate and you're just relaxing. So if thinking about that, counting that exhale only does that one thing, well, that's a big thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Have you had any of your other firefighters do this out of curiosity? I can imagine, you know, if you've got, say, newer individuals or maybe people who are just more prone to anxiety, for example, like stuff like this might have an even more pronounced, because you're pretty laid back, you're pretty tolerant of stress, at least from what I've seen of you. For someone who's naturally anxious, I can imagine something like this having maybe even a more pronounced effect.
The various pieces of this have been given to, applied to, coached to lots of guys. And like anything, you can't want it more than they do. So I can give you this tool or series of tools that will certainly help you. But if you put into Zins right before you go to bed. There's no amount of breathing that's going to overcome that. You know what I mean? And so for uniformed personnel, not just firemen, but cops and paramedics of all veins, there are other hurdles to also address that I think if you're willing to address those things in tandem with these things, you'll get a lot more out of this.
Yeah, sure. So I want to backtrack a little bit to your supplements now that you mentioned your sleep supplements that you take regardless of where you are sleeping that night.
Yeah.
So the two that we have here is 20 grams of melatonin. Now, obviously the main thing for that is that it helps set your circadian rhythm, but it is also a very, very strong anti-inflammatory. Like behind glutathione, it's probably the second strongest anti-inflammatory and antioxidant in the body, which is one of the biggest benefits people are going to get from taking it. Now, the whole myth, should we say, about it disrupting your own production has been pretty much very thoroughly disproven now, so people don't need to worry about that so much. So that is almost, that's about as close to a universal supplement, I would probably say, to be honest. And then we've also got magnesium taurate in there. Now the cool thing about that one is that it directly binds to and partially inhibits your beta receptors. So those are the receptors that adrenaline wants to bind to. So now you have magnesium like partially taking up these receptors. Adrenaline can't bind as well, which means, of course, you're going to be a little bit more chilled out, winding down, etc., etc. I think magnesium taurate is probably, when it comes to sleep, seems to be the best one. It's closely followed by glycinate. The only downside that I have found to magnesium is you've got 800 milligrams there. I would say that's moderately high. When you start pushing that up, you can run into a similar issue that people get when they overdo the creatine boluses, where you get a little bit of GI distress and that type of thing. But for most people, 500 to 1,000 milligrams is like a sweet spot that they don't get anything untoward from. Have you ever had any issues with like waking up groggy or anything like that from that amount of melatonin and magnesium?
So certainly not from the magnesium. And before we started working together, since we've worked together, I think I've taken every iteration of magnesium in massive doses, never had a problem. Some folks from some of the cheaper versions of mag get some GI upset.
Upside.
Yeah, exactly. I'm fortunate. No amount of creatine, no amount of mag has ever given me any issues. If it does, like particular creatine, split up your 20 grams over the course of the day.
Sure.
I'm not going to take the big doses of melatonin at work. Some people wake up a little groggy. They wake up a little fuzzy. We can't afford that.
Yeah, sure.
A thing that it just occurred to me is not on here that we've used for quite a while is glycine in addition to the mag. And I missed when you sent me this that that wasn't on there. So those are the two big ones that I take at work are the mag and the glycine. Sure. And then melatonin's always in there on my days off. Yeah. Bigger dose the first night, smaller dose the second night I'm on.
Yeah, sure. Now with the again, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know why I missed that. The glycine is another great one because that also partially inhibits adrenaline binding on the beta receptor, but a different mechanism to magnesium. And that, again, I've seen that go so high in dosing and have no negative effects. And the other cool thing about it, you know, because finances are a thing, like glycine is dirt cheap.
So cheap, yeah.
And, you know, it even has positive effects on like mTOR activation. So you can take that post-workout too to increase your mTOR activation from the workout and get the whole neurological inhibition winding down thing. So that works really well. So I'm glad you brought that up in terms of the melatonin, like not using it on days when you expect to be disrupted, because you need to be able to switch it on really fast. Whereas the one downside of having really good deep sleep is that you're not ready to go instantly if you need to be. So that's a very good point. And then we have it written there, like you just mentioned, the first night after your night at work, if you've had a poor night of sleep, we actually increase that melatonin, not just to help reinforce that circadian rhythm, but again, it being an anti-inflammatory, any hangover in terms of cerebral inflammation we've got from the crappy night before that the creatine maybe hasn't gotten rid of, the melatonin can hopefully get rid of there. One thing I did want to talk about still on the sleep was the vagus nerve massage.
Yes.
Because like vagus nerve devices are like getting really popular right now. And they're a bit pricey, to be fair, for what they are. And I've tried a few. I've had plenty of clients trying a few, and they just don't really seem to live up to it. Where I have found individuals who learned how to do the actual vagus nerve massage themselves and actually put some effort into like, oh, it didn't work the first time, so I'm not doing it, actually get way more out of it than, you know, anyone who's using these fancy devices. So how have you found that?
For something that costs nothing,
Yes.
that I learned from a YouTube video, game changer.
Yeah.
And not just for me. I encourage people to use it. I send the video. This is a thing that I have sent to probably far more people than any of the other things we've talked about so far. Like, take magnesium, take this kind. Here's how much you should take. But like, watch this video, do this vagus massage every night. A mutual friend of ours is using it for him and his wife every night. It has been, I mean, heck, you sit down and pet your dog, rub the inside of their ears the same way, and they'll fall asleep in your lap. Like, this is a thing that just works. I didn't realize that people were selling gadgets that do a thing you can do for free with your thumb. Yeah,
exactly right. And, you know, that's the cool thing I like about a lot of these things is, you know, the breath work, the vagus nerve massage, they're free. They're stuff that everyone can do for no investment other than a tiny little bit of effort and time. Like, they're so approachable to people. Now, one of the things that you are using that does require investment is the red light device.
Yes.
Now, you're using that in the evening, this is an interesting one because for the right person, in this case, you, the pre-bed like red light can be awesome. And at the end of the day, it makes sense, right? We associate red light with sunset and, you know, that's the type of wavelength of light that we are, experiencing closer later in the day, all of that type of thing. And it would make a lot of sense that it would help with parasympathetic activation. And for a lot of people, it does. But there are some, should we say, that are more prone to anxiety and things like that can find it too stimulating. Now, you can dose it and adjust the intensity there, but for you as someone who is like a good responder to it, what difference did you feel that created? So
I think that there is a little bit of you get what you pay for. When we first started talking about this, I had some red light bulbs.
Sure.
So I started with that, and it was like, is this making a difference? Maybe. Maybe. I mean, what is that I say all the time? The placebo effect is still an effect.
Yeah. Sure.
But then when I got the actual, you know, red light emitter, which, you know, is just a big bulb on an arm, and then I can manipulate it, like sitting down before we were doing the non-sleep deep rest, it was just a little bit of meditation with the red light on. It was very calming. It was very relaxing. And I moved the thing around. Like, I propped it up on my shower curtain and turned the light off. So I was in the shower and getting the red light that way. The whole thing, it's dimmer, it's relaxing. Like, it, additionally though, it's just part of building that routine.
Sure.
And so if you put a thing in your routine and it's relaxing, it kind of becomes this cascade of this thing relaxes me, and then this additional thing is a little more, and this additional thing's a little more. And yeah, I have one at work now too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever walked in and someone else is using it, like tanning themselves? And
Not yet.
I think you mentioned the red light bulbs there, and I think you're right in terms of like you buy an actual infrared, near infrared emitter. That is not the same thing as a red light bulb.
Right.
However, I wouldn't discredit the red light bulb, but I think the benefit of the red light bulbs come from it's not a blue light.
It's not blue light. Right.
that's about as far as, which is not a bad thing. It's just it's not the same thing at all. But for some, they'll need to like be a little bit careful with that infrared exposure pre-bed. For some people, it's better in the morning. Like if they're someone who wakes up very anxious and that type of thing, they can use it at lower intensity to calm down. Or they might just be someone who needs to use it at night, have it further away from them, have a smaller unit, have less exposure and things like that. You can easily just like put it on your side so you don't get it directly into your eyes and things like that to help adjust the intensity there. I think that's that's enough on sleep, probably, unless you have any other relevant points there. Sleep's important.
Sleep's important.
Yeah, please do it. Do more of it. So let's look at how we were supporting you cognitively now during this wonderful time period of, I'm going to revise like hell for this incredibly important promotion and do a single ply powerlifting meet. Yeah. And they're both going to end up happening in the same week.
Correct.
So that was, and we did a pretty neurologically demanding training cycle for that meet.
Yeah.
You know, with the PRM progression, things like that. So we weren't going easy on you in that regard. So let's take a quick look at your basic daily nootropic supplements. Again, Noah can put these up on the screen for you guys. So we have DHEA in there, which when you're taking it at lower dosages like that, 50 to 100 milligrams, basically under 100 milligrams, it ends up not having any effect on sex hormone cascades and that type of thing. So you don't need to worry about that when you're taking these lower dosages. The main thing this is doing in your context is it helps reduce the excitatory toxicity that we get from a lot of stress, a lot of glutamate, all that type of thing. It helps bring down and combat that, as well as making sure you have enough raw material to create cortisol and adrenaline, all that type of stuff, because they have to be made from something at the end of the day. If you're producing a lot of them, we need to be replacing that. So that's why the DHEA comes in there. We have acetyl L-carnitine, which again is another dirt cheap nootropic that everyone pretty much is going to get on with, and all that does is donate methyl groups so that you can create acetylcholine, so that your brain has four main fuels, should we say, or options for fuel. It's got oxygen. I think we've all got that one covered reasonably well. We've got glucose, we've got ketones, and we've got acetylcholine. So we're going to support that acetylcholine there with the acetyl L-carnitine. Taking it orally is very, very different to taking it by injection, which we'll cover later. We've got their tiger's milk, which again is another one that is almost universally beneficial for everyone. That drives up nerve-derived growth factor, which is just one of the growth factors which is important for creating new neurons, new connections, and that type of thing. We have 600 milligrams of alpha GPC, which is a pretty high dose, which is acting as a choline donor so that you can create more acetylcholine. And then we also have ketones or MCT oil, depending on finances or what you can get a hold of, to help create more fuel with regards to ketones there. So that is, especially with the ketones and the alpha GPC there, that's quite a lot of fuel. Mm-hmm. But you were doing a lot.
I was doing a lot.
What was like your average kind of day or two looking like during this prep and study period?
So if I was at work, then I was only working 24 hours, typically on an ambulance, training new people, helping the community, etc., and trying to study for however many hours were left in the day. On days that I wasn't at work, it was 4 to 7 hours in the books, depending on what the training load was for that day. Because again, we had that meet 4 days after, and just a quick outline, the promotional test was 4 hours of various scenarios. You'd be testing on one thing, they'd come and yank you out of that room, make you do another thing. Before you finish that, they'd pull you out of the room. So it was very mentally draining, very high load. And so we had to prepare for that. So come home from work, spend, 3 or 4 hours in the books, a couple hours in the gym, 3 or 4 hours in the books, then pick my kid up from school and have to be a dad.
Sure.
And, not drive my family away in the process.
Yeah, well, very, very important point there. So you needed all that fuel. It's the point that we're trying to make there. And then we also have, 3 days per week when he had more workload, whether that was like more studying or his most intensive training sessions, whatever that might be, we would increase the tiger's milk. So the reason for that is if we're going to drive up nerve-derived growth factor even more, days when he's learning is a good time to do that. But you can't overdrive a system all the time. So that's why we have here 3 non-consecutive days, ideally. So we up the tiger's milk to increase the ability to learn and retain memories. And then we also add in extra ketones for extra fuel. Now, throughout here, we've got a couple of things highlighted in red. Brad is in a scenario where, being in the job that he is, there are certain things that would be frowned upon, should we say, that he cannot take. But what we're trying to put up here is just options that the average person probably does have access to, that they could experiment with in this scenario. So for example, here we've got as an example, instead of that, you could use Semax, which can be taken as a nasal spray or an injection. And basically what that does is increases serotonin and dopamine and allows you to get a lot of work done in, should we say, a more high arousal state. If you're someone who needs to be very calm, like you wouldn't use this towards the end of the day, for example, you'd use this in the early morning before something that's very cognitively taxing, like going on an extended call out, a study period, or a very intense training session. So that's what we were doing 3 days a week to help give you a boost on those harder days. Now we also have something here to do before you study, because you were doing pretty long study sessions, right? Yeah. And was the old textbook primarily?
It was, because of the way the test was laid out, I would spend some amount of time in a book and then some amount of time watching videos, but then I'd have to write reports on the stuff that I had written. So it was really a multimedia kind of study campaign.
Yeah. And then swapping between tasks is more strenuous again.
Sure.
In terms of what's cognitively required there. So 2 times per week, Brad could bring this in during his bigger study periods to help fuel him for those study sessions. So here we got even more alpha GPC because he's going to be burning through choline like nobody's business doing all of this studying. We also bring in the intranasal creatine. Now, intranasal creatine is one that hasn't quite caught on yet. And I'm sure it will at some point because people now love creatine. So why wouldn't we love intranasal creatine? The idea there is very simple. All of the cerebral inflammation benefits that we can get from taking it orally, we can get quicker and more pronounced from a very small dose if we take it intranasally. The only downside of it is, as far as I'm aware, no company is making this yet. So it's a pain in the ass to make yourself and to get it to mix properly. So that's the downside. And then we've also put in there 1 to 2 grams of tyrosine. The reason for that is that tyrosine is a precursor to dopamine. If we want to feel motivated, we want to be able to concentrate, then we need dopamine. So we put that in there as a precursor to help drive that up. And then we have a funky little drill here where you can take your notepad and write in cursive writing. Cursive writing is important because it makes both hemispheres of your brain have to communicate with each other. Write 4 to 5 lines of your favorite faster paced song, whatever that might be, which for you is obviously going to be like Justin Bieber or whatever it might be. Write it as one long, unbroken sentence and then read it out loud as quickly as possible a couple of times without getting tongue-tied. Again, Wernicke's area, Broca's area, and all these other brain areas that are on opposite hemispheres now have to talk to each other to fire up your brain. And then we've got the daily neuroplastic games that are on the Elevate app. Now you're in a scenario where you can start studying. So it's basically, you do a warm-up to train. So this is your warm-up to train your brain, I guess. So looking at that, how long did that little warm-up take you, out of curiosity, before you actually start your studying?
Not particularly long. I went from the 3 Elevate games to 5. So that, increased the time. Those are 3 minutes a piece. So you're at 15 minutes of Elevate games, 2 or 3 minutes to write your lyrics in cursive. So you're probably ready to go in 20 minutes, which is reasonable using your analogy of it's a warm up for training.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And then also by the time you're taking your alpha GPC, taking your creatine, taking your tyrosine, that's not in your system instantaneously. The intranasal creatine's pretty close. It gives 10 to 15 minutes, whatever, for that to help get into your system. It's like, now I am prepped. And, I do like the analogy of, if you're going to warm up to train your body, then you should probably also warm up to train your brain, because the way most of us go through our day, we're not instantly ready to sit down and concentrate with any meaningful effect, right? And then so in red, in like the gray area world where Brad is not allowed to tread, other options that could be used here would be NuPep. NuPep is like my favorite for studying, especially. It increases like the communication speed of your neuron. It pulls down glutamate so you can do more work without getting inflammation. Has really, really pronounced effects on speech and memory. So anytime that you have to do a podcast or talk publicly or, remember or learn anything, NuPep is a great one. But also we have options like Dihexer, J147. I put Salank there. Salank, again, like Salank and Semax, people always get them mixed up. They sound the same. They do slightly different things. Basically, Solank is the one if you want to kind of be like in a chilled state whilst you're doing whatever the cognitively demanding thing is. And then Simax is the one if you want a bit more dopamine and pick me up, more energized. We also have SS31 there, which can be used as a nasal spray. The SS31 as a nasal spray with creatine and Nupept is the closest thing that I have found to what's the film with Bradley Cooper in it? Limitless. What's the drug called in there? I remember. That's going to annoy me now. I know I could put it up on the screen and annoy me. But that drug that they use in Limitless, that's the closest thing I found. Like when I was experimenting with that, it was like gaining 10 or 20 IQ points like instantly. So I was at like 22. It was awesome. So that's the NZT. NZT. There we go. So anyone out there who's an at-home chemist, if you can make that for me, call it NZT or whatever, like I'll be extremely grateful because I'm fed up of mixing all that myself at home right now. Now, we mentioned at the top there the alpha GPC, the creatine, the tyrosine. So I do think that's important here, just to circle back and say, when you're doing these intense study sessions, it is important to actually fuel them. Like your brain is burning through fuel, and people don't really look at that. Like, but again, we should kind of look at it in the same way that we look at a workout. Like the ketones, the glucose, the choline, all can be incredibly helpful there in giving you, should we say, endurance. What I was going to ask you was, with these longer study sessions that you were doing, did you ever find yourself like hitting the wall mentally? Because that can be a thing. Like when you're doing these really cognitively demanding tasks for long periods of time, you can literally just run out of fuel. Yeah. Like it's not a willpower, it's just running on empty. Did you ever experience that out of curiosity? So
prior to, in the first stage of testing, we weren't doing this stuff. And that was hours a day in a textbook. And it was killing me. Okay. And then when we started to put this stuff in, if I remembered to take my Tiger's Milk or my Alpha GPC, like I would be focused, but I wouldn't be fueled.
Sure.
If I remembered to take my ketones, like, not that there was many times where not everything was taken as it was prescribed, but that was a time where I definitely didn't have the gas to get to where I was going. But you could have the focus from the other things, and then you add in the ketones, and it's like, it really fueled, you felt like you could go forever.
Sure.
That was a serious benefit to those long sessions, was all of those things together.
See, that's the thing that annoys me about all the ketone companies right now, is like they're marketed as like these magic fat loss aids, and it's like, I kind of get why you're doing it, like that's what sells, but like for 99%, they don't really directly burn fat anyway. Like nothing does. They have calories, if anything. So like they're not helping in some regards, but they do give you that neurological fuel. And it's really weird when, I take them on the days that I fast, and it is a strange sensation where you just feel like that mental endurance is better, but there's no like stimulation. It's not like having a cup of coffee or whatever. It's just like, it's almost like going in the gym and doing like an aerobic workout and just having more air. It's a strange feeling. I just wish that they were marketed better so that more people would use them, because I think a lot of people are missing out on those. And the other note I wanted to put on there is eye fatigue, just because that is so often what limits people in these things. Like their eyes literally get tired from holding that same, when I'm looking something here or in the distance, my eye has to be a different shape. The muscles of my eye have to behave differently. If you are contracting your bicep in one specific position for hours at a time, you'd expect it to get tired. And we get the same thing here. And I think a lot of people could do a lot more and be more productive in their workday if they just gave their eyes a break. Like get up from your computer, go outside, look into the distance. You can put a freaking eye chart on the other side of your office and just turn around and do the eye chart, and then just go back to work, do another 30 minutes, turn around and do the eye chart. Like it can be that simple to increase your productivity. And I think that's something that just doesn't get talked about there. So next up, we've got written down your peak week protocol. Was there anything else you want to touch on about studying?
No, I think we're rolling.
Okay. We're okay. So let's go back to your peak week protocol then. So remember, as we're looking at this, Tuesday we have the exam, right?
Yes.
So remember, at this point, I want to put a little bit of context here. Your last training week, so you had a peak week for your competition when the lifting was on the Saturday. The week prior to that, you were still doing your very, very heavy lifting in your gear in squat and bench, I believe. Deadlift was done the week before. They didn't go too well, did they?
Oh, no. No, I was smashed.
Yes, you were.
Yeah.
And what were you seeing as a result of that? Because this is common.
The fatigue had reached a point where weights I had been doing for much of the training cycle, just taking weight out of the mono, just having it on my back, I was shaking like a leaf.
Yeah.
Like all the way down, shaking to the point I didn't think I'd be able to get back up. It's like, you know, you have 2 or 3 prescribed reps for this lift, and I couldn't get one because the side to side movement was greater than the up and down movement.
Yeah. I remember, and what did Dave and multiple other people all said the same thing to you, right?
Yeah, it's like, you're ready for a deload, you're going to be fine. And I'm not the guy who like, well, I failed at this thing, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I always say, like, I don't need you to give me the stick, I'll do that part.
Yeah, sure.
And so I was pretty hard on myself. And having Dave tell me, I think Dave knows everything about everything, and I still couldn't hear it.
Yeah,
like I was not in a position where I can be receptive to that.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, you're coming to the end of this study period, and you've been doing a single ply competition prep, which we've been using some pretty intense neurological methods there. Your nervous system was shot, and that's a really common presentation of that. Like, as soon as you get under heavy loads, you're just shaking like a leaf. And it's like when you've got too many programs open on a computer, and you just get like that little spinny wheel of doom and whatever. It's like your computer, with your brain, your nervous system, just can't deal with all of the stuff you're throwing at it because it's not functioning at good capacity. So this is what we did to help get your nervous system recovered, not just for the meet, but then also for the exam as well. And was any of the shaking, etc., a problem on meet day?
No.
7 days later?
No.
So this worked reasonably well, would be a fair thing to say. Okay, so we have the Sunday before. Alpha GPC, we've already discussed about how that is replenishing, because remember, Brad is still studying at this point too. So we want to replenish all the choline, especially we probably at this point have a choline debt, where like we have to replenish all the stuff we burned through in his training and everything else. That's in there. We bring in ashwagandha, because that basically helps limit how high cortisol and adrenaline can get. It's that simple. Like, it just, rather than getting this bigger spike, it will just take that top end off the spike and just stop it getting too high, which means that you can come down quicker and spend more time parasympathetic state. Now, be warned, ashwagandha is, I think, very effective for a lot of people. There's, I want to say like 5%, maybe less, of people have a problem with any drug that works on 5-alpha reductase. So that means ashwagandha, finasteride, and lion's mane. If you take ashwagandha and you feel awful, or you take lion's mane and feel awful, that is you. Do not take these drugs. Never take finasteride or any of that family, because it will end very, very badly. That's where like all this post-finasteride syndrome stuff comes from. Anyway, sorry, but that's important for the 3% or whatever people that need it. Now, we've also got injectable L-carnitine coming here. Now, remember, carnitine does so many wonderful things, but you cannot get the action that you get from injectable L-carnitine from oral carnitine, because it has to go through the gut. You can't get super physiological levels, and that's where carnitine ends up getting a bad rap, because of all the TMAO enzymes and all the gut dysregulation that happens when you're trying to force this crazy amount of carnitine through a gut that can't absorb it. Injectable L-carnitine, you can bypass that and get all these wonderful benefits, which in Brad's case, what we're using this for here is like improved beta oxidation, improved glycogen storage. Basically, it drives up storage of just about every substrate you can handle. Now, bear in mind, at this point, we did a weight cut for this, right?
We did.
So Brad is not only revising at the end of a very stressful training cycle, he's also doing a weight cut. So basically what we're doing with the L-carnitine there is increasing the fat loss from him being in a low calorie state, but also when he is eating, helping the restorage of all of that nutrients that we're kind of dumping out with those low calories. Then he's going out, getting outside and walking and meditating, and he's still playing his Elevate games even though he's not training, or even if he's not studying, because it's like blood flow work. You know, most people will go into the gym and like do some band work and stuff like that, because we all know that like, oh, putting blood in a joint's a good thing, especially if you're not training, you're getting ready for a meet. The Elevate app here is the same thing there. But whilst this is doing a lot of cool things in terms of substrates, and the L-carnitine's doing a lot, the getting outside, the meditating, I think is something that everyone should be doing in deload week, even if they don't do it ever again. Do you know what I mean? Like outside of that, because the whole goal is when you get to this point in your training cycle, your sensitivity to adrenaline has tanked because you've been pushing it up and up and up for this level of performance. The only way to resensitize that is to be low in adrenaline, which means parasympathetic, being chilled, whatever. How do you achieve that quickly? Get outside, get in nature, get some sunlight, get some meditation, whatever it is that does it for you. That, I think, is possibly more pronounced in its effect on all of this other cool stuff that we're talking about. We move on to the Monday, and we have you lifting, which again might be uncommon for most. Now, we have the same players in there in terms of alpha GPC and the ashwagandha. The reason for the lifting is, this isn't going to suit everyone, but we take someone like Brad. Brad is relatively new to single ply lifting. How long have you been doing the single ply stuff for?
This meat prep.
Yeah. So that's about as new as someone can get, right? So there's a skill element here that is not as well ingrained as someone who has been doing it for a decade,
Sure.
Right? So if he doesn't do any barbell lifting for a week, he will get a little bit rusty. So all he's doing is going in and doing some really light lifting on 2 occasions in this week in the minimal amount of kit humanly possible so that he can mimic the lifting pattern that he wants to do on the day. It's just mental practice more than anything. Now, you were taking alpha GPC prior to that lifting session to bump up your ability to motor learn. Basically, it's skill practice for the day. Again, as we've already mentioned, things like Nupept and Dihexa and things like that could also be used there. Then we have Tuesday, which is exam day. Now, we did have a whole protocol for before the exam and things like that as well. But in terms of lifting, nothing being done on that day. The L-carnitine being brought back in again. What we'll see is during this, the L-carnitine is being brought in every other day because you can't hyperdrive storage every day, realistically. So the idea is that we have a day where we refuel better, then we have a day off where we let him get depleted even more because we're doing a weight cut, and then we have a day where we recover a little bit better. You did the exam on Tuesday, you did extremely well.
I did very well.
Once again. We move on to Wednesday. Brad is now having to recover from his exam. So we bring in glutathione, which is a good thing to do in your peak week recovery protocol anyway. Get rid of any outstanding inflammation and things like that that have built up over this stressful work period, especially then from the exam the previous day. Note here is to take taurine with it. When you take glutathione, it needs a sulfide donor. Taurine is the easiest way to get that. If you're going to go through the effort of injecting glutathione, actually make sure you get the most out of it, which means taking oral taurine with it. And then once again, we're in the gym doing some even lighter practice work in, when we say minimal amount of kit here possible, what did you use when you went in the gym this week?
I didn't use anything.
You didn't use anything? So how were you mimicking the kind of like the bar path stroke on your bench or like the squat width on your squat? Did you just find no issue with that?
So because, like you mentioned, I was so new to single ply, my single ply squat looked like my raw squat. Now, for guys who are a lot wider, then you might need that support in the hips. Pair of briefs or something might go there. But for this prep, I didn't need anything to mimic it because I was lifting raw whilst wearing single ply.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. And I'd say for the deadlift there, that's not going to be an issue for the vast majority of people anyway. Cool. Then we get 2 days out. Again, we bring in the injectable glutathione. Remember, if you're cutting weight, any outstanding inflammation that you have, which you will have if you've done a meat prep, is going to stop you dropping water weight. So if we can bring in things like glutathione, extra melatonin, anything, even high dose vitamin C, anything that's going to get that inflammatory state down will make it so much easier to drop water. So that's another reason why that's been put in again there, is because at this point we are going to dehydrate him and drop a couple of pounds for him to weigh in, and that's going to help us do that. Then last but not least, 1 day out, again, the alpha GPC, the ashwagandha stay in. This time we bring in lion's mane to help bring up his dopamine levels, which he's going to need ready for the big day that comes afterwards. So my main question for you is like going through this as like a meat week prep with an a very stressful exam in the middle of that. If we take you here like Sunday morning, 6 days out, how do you feel there compared to Saturday morning, like prior to warming up and doing whatever? Like, what's the, in terms of like brain fog or motivation or mood, whatever, like what did you experience across this week?
So the end of prep, that Sunday, because that Sunday I benched and my bench went as bad as the squat did on the Saturday before. So I don't want to say I had never felt worse, but I had never felt worse coming out of a prep. Physically, I was smashed. Mentally, I was exhausted. I was not looking forward to the coming week, but I trusted the process. And every day I felt significantly better, to the point where arriving in Alabama on Saturday, I had never felt that good. I mean, maybe ever. And very dialed in. Everything went exactly the way we wanted it to go. So going from almost as bad as you've ever felt to better than you've ever felt with, 7 incremental steps from Sunday to Saturday, I'd call it a success.
Sure. Now how do you feel now that you've gone through that process and seen like the extreme change that you could experience in that time? How do you think the next prep is going to be for you mentally? Now, obviously, because you've experienced the neurological fatigue that comes with doing an equipped competition prep. Because even if it's only single ply, it's still super maximal, right? Relative to your raw capabilities, and you're new to it. So that makes the stimulus even stronger again. So how do you feel about your capability to handle that now that you've been through the process once?
I suspect I'll become unbearable. Like, when you do some dumb shit and get away with it, like there's a chance to learn a lesson there. Yeah. And I don't know that that's going to be the case. Like I piled a ton on and it all went my way. So I don't know what we're going to pile on in addition to these 2 things next time. Okay. But yeah, I think that hopefully when I get to that neurological fatigue point at the end where I'm shaking so much that I can't make a lift and Dave Tate comes and tells me that I'm going to be fine, I'll have the wherewithal to believe him. Yeah. If we get only that change, then maybe we've done something.
There's also video evidence of you saying that now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn
but what you're saying is, in a way, we've created our rod for our own back because you gave us a horrible scenario and you survived and did really well.
That's exactly right.
It's like, how can we push the needle even further next time?
Yeah.
Perfect. I love a good challenge. But I think this was, as a coach, this was a fun gauntlet for you to put down. Being like, hey, here's this super important, stressful exam. Here's the single ply meet. It's going to, like, everything's going to be ramping up at the same time. And I need to, like, we can probably say the promotion's more important, but both were very important to you.
Yes.
So there can't really be a perception of like, oh, this one's secondary in terms of this is a second. It's just, we have to go full steam ahead at both. And I was, obviously I was very happy that it went as well for you as you did, but for me, it was an interesting exercise to like, how do I drag a human being through this and get them to do well?
And we were fairly far into prep when we learned that they were moving the test.
Yes.
Like we went from having 3 weeks between the two to having 4 days between the two.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a ton of notice for that change.
Yeah. That was, I mean, at that point, just pile it on.
Yeah.
Like it's already a dumpster fire. Like, screw it, just pile it on. Well, I think that was everything that I wanted to cover. Was there anything in particular you wanted to discuss or bring up?
No, I think that the thing that I really wanted to get out of this was like, if you work shift work, if you're a first responder, if you're a nurse, if you're a new parent, there are things that you can be doing to improve the amount of sleep you're getting, to improve the quality of that sleep, to reduce that overall cortisol. And those have been big changes for me. You don't just have to suffer through it. It's not the cost of doing business. Like I made the choice to do this job and I made the choice to suffer for as long as I did before I found somebody that could like help me right the ship. And it's been a big deal. Like for me, for the wife and kid, like everybody has noticed like how much more involved I am, how much more focused I am when I'm at home. And I mean, do it for that if you don't do it for anything
Well,
else.
I mean, is anything more important than that?
Not to me.
You know, like the PRs and stuff are cool and the exams cool, but like that, not just surviving your life, but enjoying it and being able to be present during the times that you work hard to actually create at the end of the day is more important then. So that gives me great pleasure hearing that it's had that effect for you. And thank you so much for your time today. Noah, I think we are done. Thank you so much.